Eternal Strands is a fantasy-themed third-person action-adventure game. It is the debut title from developer and publisher Yellow Brick Games. In Eternal Strands, we play as Bryn, a young and fearless warrior and weaver. As a weaver, we are armed with powerful magic abilities and an arsenal of weapons. We are thrown into a world of mystery, a world of opportunity, and a world of danger. When we're looking at the gameplay for Eternal Strands, the question in my mind is always, is this fun? Is this enjoyable? And how engaging is the gameplay? And I think there's really two main parts of gameplay where you're going to spend basically 95% of your time. You're going to be out in the world exploring and fighting, and you're going to be at your base camp talking and planning. This formula means that it's important that the time exploring and fighting are good. And I'm here to say, I think the time exploring and fighting are good. So the question then is, right, what about the time at the base camp? Is it also good? And for me, it's about 50-50. It's really going to come down to how much you love the characters. The characters are all fully voiced, which I like very much. They'll have backstories, a little bit of personality, a little bit of world building mixed in with the various dialogue with the main camp characters. When you're not talking with your crew, you're going to spend that time at camp crafting and upgrading and recrafting and balancing and changing and shaping your items. Okay, that's going to be your armor, your magic, and your weapons. If you really fall in love with these characters and their different motivations and interests, then this is going to be so much fun for you. If the characters you kind of bounce off of and you go, I don't really care what you care about, I'm not interested in the story you want to share with me, the base camp's going to feel really flat because then you're just down to time and menus managing your inventory. To be clear, when I mean inventory management, we are at the armorer either building weapons, or there's a lovely system where you can change the items your armor and weapons are made out of, so you can level it up. It's a upgrade system of sorts that is built around the more you explore and the further you progress the main story campaign, you're going to unlock new items that are going to allow you to craft better or improve current armors and weapons and magic, which then will allow you to fight more intense foes. This is a traditional gameplay loop we see in a lot of games. You've probably experienced this before in several other genres. I find it pretty compelling. I think it keeps a nice pace here in Eternal Strands, and I think that this is a good foundation for the game moving forward. The story and world building is 90% done through dialogue. There's not a lot of narrative or lore constructed through the environmental clues. That does exist, but it doesn't seem to be the primary driver for plot or character development. I think the immersive qualities of the world are held back from the story and world building perspective because the story and world building is so heavily focused on the narration, the dialogue with the characters. You start off with a very compelling tale around how the world is shaped and a little intro opening thematic around why you're doing what you're doing, and it's quite lovely. And kind of the first 20 to 40% of the game, you really kind of hold on to that story. But there's a middle section before you get to kind of a turning point in the plot where the story and world building kind of slows down, where you get a lot of quests that say, hey, go get this item, come back, get this item, come back, get this item, come back, which is okay. But it's not great for the story and world building. There's a turning point right around the 40 to 60% of the way through where you meet a new group. You meet a new group of individuals who kind of say to you, hey, we've been watching you, haha, wink. And all of a sudden, the story and world building is back on track. You know, there's a little bit of a pacing issue, I feel like, in the narrative and the lore here. As you pass that 60% point and you meet that second group, all of a sudden the main story is like in a headlong downhill rush to finish. You're like quite literally just a few missions from the end with a lot of world building and story told through dialogue. To emphasize again, all the dialogue is fully voiced, which is nice. However, I wasn't as thrilled to sit through, 2, 5, 8, 10, 12, 15 minutes of, we should go here and do this thing because of this problem that I kind of already knew about. We actually set up a lot of these kind of causes and effects and motivations in the story and world building much earlier on. So it was a little bit of a disrupt to not only meet a second group, but to then just agree that we all have the same problems and let's kind of work on them together. I think the choices being made here in art direction and visual design and atmosphere are striking. At first glance, things seem a little safe. They feel a little vanilla. We've kind of seen the shapes and colors and combinations, and at first glance, if you're just scrolling past and you see a little blurb about Eternal Strands in your peripheral vision, right? You just catch a glimpse of it. Nothing really stands out. Having spent time in the world, there is a distinct atmosphere that you can feel. I think that the graphics and visuals are overall appealing. There's nothing here that makes me say, well, that was boring to look at. I think most things had some care taken when creating them. They've been placed with a deliberateness, and there's certainly a level of visual aesthetic that is just charming and pleasing to look at. I think these visual designs stand out most strongly, not in the environment, but specifically in our character, in the armors we can put on and the weapons that we can wield. I think these are a lot of fun, and I think kind of the main big bad enemies walking around, you know what I'm talking about, the big ones, right? I think those are the ones that also stand out with their unique visual design and art direction here. From an atmosphere standpoint, that puts a lot of pressure on the level design. I think the levels are overall designed in a way that just makes sense. I don't feel like they are designed to challenge us. I think they are designed in a very balanced way that's just going to kind of lead you along. One of the very first levels we end up on has us start at the top of a hill, and the only way you can go is down the hill. As you move your way down the hill, there's going to be some paths that open up, giving you options to go left, to go right, to cross a log, to jump over a stream, just to start to explore. But all of those branching paths are going to nicely and neatly meet back up at the same point further on. This level design is really designed, again, not to challenge you, but to very gently guide you in the direction of that next objective. The levels have an open feel while also having a bit of a narrow focus. Some levels are more broad than others, while other levels are a little more of a kind of a bowling alley shape, where at the end of it, as long as you keep trying to see new things, eventually you will have climbed each hill, you will have crossed every river, you will have jumped over all the trees, and you will end up at a set point. This variety helps keep the game pacing together, and this level design really encourages a beginner-friendly experience. It's tough to say if Eternal Strands got the balance right for being either too easy or too frustrating. At times, it just felt too easy. At other times, it felt a little frustrating, and I was never really sure, was I doing the wrong thing or just in the wrong place at that time? I think overall, as far as balance goes, I think it sides towards fair, not difficult. I think it sides towards easy, not frustrating. I think overall the balance has a very gradual, gentle curve where it's unlikely you're going to feel overwhelmed, as most enemies and most encounters you can run away from. It's unlikely you're going to feel overly overwhelmed by the combat, but something that may feel a little overwhelming are the weather effects. The map has different weather effects, and the armors you can wear have different environmental resistances. There are times when the environment you go into is encountering a heat wave, and it's very hot. There's times when you go out into the environment and it's encountering a flash freeze, and all of a sudden everything's frozen. And at times you're going to go into encounters and you're going to be like, man, why was this fight so hard? Well, in those environments, there's times when your character is freezing cold and they're starting to get a damage over time effect from the heat and the cold. And now all of a sudden you're moving slower because it's draining your stamina. The environmental effects do have an influence on the difficulty and they do give a sense of refreshment to the levels. You're going to be re-going through a lot of these levels multiple times, and because of that, having different weather effects and having different, mini boss monsters roaming the map definitely give them a refreshing feel, as the main story has you return to locations for various plot reasons. Which means a lot of the times when I felt like the balance was a little off, if I took a step back and went, I haven't leveled up or upgraded my weapons or my magic in a little while, and my armor doesn't have good frost defense, and I'm fighting a big monster that wants to make everything freezing cold. I think this emphasizes one of Eternal Strands' weaknesses in the pacing: the balance between action and the slower moments. Not great. The momentum isn't really maintained very well through the game. And part of that is because the dichotomy of there's time you spend at camp planning your next mission, talking to your friends, and there's time you spend out in the world on the mission exploring and fighting, and they have a very different feel to their pacing. I think this balance between action and slower moments is helped by the fact that your characters at camp can also converse with you. There's a little bit of a radio system, if you will, that helps them chat with you when you're out in the world. A little bit of magic at play here. However, if you did not find the characters very charming, maybe the last thing you want is them continuing to talk in your ear as you're out exploring. I think this balance between action and slower moments in the levels is a little tricky as well. Sometimes it feels like I've just fought a couple of wolves. Where are the next wolves? How do I find the next mob to fight? It can be a little sometimes frustrating when I'm exploring in kind of the wrong direction, unbeknownst to me, because I'm new here. And then I finally kind of find where I should be, and now the action's on. I think this pacing of slower moments in action really disrupts the game's momentum. A lot of time is spent fast traveling between the two camps once you meet that second group. There's the first group you meet right at the start of the game, and there's a second group you meet a little later on. Once you meet that second group, you're going to not only have to talk to your camp, you're going to then fast travel to the other camp so you can talk to them, and they'll say to you, hey, let's fast travel back to your camp. Let me repeat that. You go from your camp, okay, location A, to a second group's camp at location B. So you talk at location A, you talk at location B. At location B, they say, let's talk back at location A. You go back to location A and talk. And then they're like, okay, now that we've talked it out, get a good night's rest and go fight the monsters tomorrow. Oh, okay. This is so disruptive to momentum that as the story picks up pace, the action and the exploration slows down. I think the first half of the game has the best pacing, the balance between let's go do something and we're doing it, and the balance between let's get settled, let's talk about what we discovered, how does this change things, is really well managed. The longer the game progresses towards the completion point, the more this balance falls apart and momentum is failed to be maintained through the experience. When we talk about replayability, we want to remember how much incentive is there play again or to play more. And I think if you just mainline, you just straight pipe the story, I'm just doing story missions, there's more. All the characters in your camp each have their own little individual side quest. In addition, all the magic you learn can be upgraded. And if you're so inclined and you find an armor piece you like and you think this is visually fun, or you think that the bonuses from it are compelling, there's more to that armor set that you can go and try and find. There is an incentive to go out there and just explore more beyond the main story. Once the story's finished, the incentive to go back and play again is pretty low. You've kind of finished the main story, which means there's nothing really for you to fight again, so why do you need new armor? You don't need more magic to clear things. Once you've finished the story, that means that your armor and weapons and magic and whatnot were good enough to get it done. You don't really need to come back. There aren't branching narratives. There's no diverse choices. There's no new game modes. As of the time of the recording of this review, there are no missable achievements. Everything after the main story, if you want to run down achievements, you can still run them down. You don't need to start over. I think that the lack of replayability is a strength of Eternal Strands. I don't think everything needs to be a forever game. I think it's okay that there aren't diverse choices. I like the idea that developers have a story they want to tell. They have a journey that they want you to go on. There's an emotion they want you to feel at different points. And that is shaped by the lack of diverse choices. That's a good thing. I'm okay with there not being new game modes. I don't feel like this game needed to reinvent the wheel and come up with some kind of random boss rush or some kind of time trial. However, you might feel different. You might be here like, seriously, no branching narrative paths? No branching narrative paths. What, you're telling me there's no new game modes? No, you finish the game and that's the game. Eternal Strands is not the most innovative game. Eternal Strands is not the most original game. Yes, Eternal Strands is a creative project, it is a unique experience, and it brings something good to the table. I do like having that hub. I like having that base camp where we all get together before the mission. The characters meet, they talk, we plan, we prep. I like a good camp. I like a good hub center. And I like when we go out and there's a separation between camp life and out in the world fighting and exploring. I think this is a fun mechanic. It's not new, it's not innovative, it's not original, and not everything needs to reinvent the wheel, redesign the cube. You know, it's okay that Eternal Strands here has taken lots of other established, safe, known mechanics and put them into their creation. I think overall it's a good thing. At release, Eternal Strands has 9 distinct bosses that roam the game's world. These are cool. Part of the fights, you climb them to find weak points, and by targeting those weak points, you have an opportunity to harvest the boss and bring that special boss essence back to camp to level up your magic. It's a very cool system. I think it's very much fun, very much engaging, and I like it. The format of the fight has existed in previous games that are on the market today. On one hand, you might say, what a bummer. I feel like I've already done that. My experience was the fights were creative and unique, and I had fun working my way through how do I take down this monster and harvest that essence. I liked it. It was fun for me. Was it an innovative thing that's never been done? No, it wasn't. And I don't think everything needs to constantly innovate and be so wholly unique that it just stands all by itself. It is okay to me that Eternal Strands is safe. You've heard me say that word a few times. To me, Eternal Strands feels like a safe bet. There's a lot of systems here that have been found in other commercially successful products, and I think that's a good thing. Eternal Strands was developed by Yellow Brick Games. These developers not only developed the game, but they also chose to self-publish the game as well. Yellow Brick Games here, they not only developed and published the game, this is the first game developed and published by Yellow Brick Games. This is their debut title. Yes, I'm sure there were experienced individuals working together to make this happen. I'm sure there were teams of people, there were employees, there were leaders, there were managers, there were all the things that make a business work working on this project. But as a company together, as a group, Yellow Brick Games here, this is their first game they've developed and published. And I think they chose a safe choice. They made something they wanted to make that had a high probability of being successful. And I think they succeeded in doing one of the hardest things, not just developing and publishing something, but developing and publishing something that is fun. Eternal Strands is a fun game. It might not be your favorite game of all time, and that's okay. I would like to see more from Yellow Brick Games. I think they've proven that they can develop and publish a game here with Eternal Strands, and I think I'd like to see another project, maybe something smaller that's a little more risky, something that pushes more boundaries. Eternal Strands here is, at first glance, a little generic, But the more time I've spent engaging with the world of Eternal Strands, spending time in the combat, the exploration, and the dialogue, the more unique it has felt and the more fun I have had. Eternal Strands launched at $40 US. When we're thinking about value for money, in comparison to other similar titles that offer a similar experience or selling point, this is a very competitive starting price. I do not think Eternal Strands is overpriced at all. I do not think Eternal Strands is underpriced. I think this is the appropriate starting point for this title at launch. In reflection, I had fun in Eternal Strands. I personally bounced off the characters pretty hard. The longer the story went, the less I cared about what the characters had to say. I think the voice actors did a good job. I think the combat is good. I think the world design is good. I think the mechanics around how you upgrade your gear, around magic, are good. I think the overarching world narrative is good as well. I think the quality of the writing is low in comparison. And it feels lower because the other characteristics are so good. The writing in Eternal Strands is not on par with the quality of the rest of the game. I think the idea behind the story is compelling. I want more from the individual characters. No, I don't want more dialogue. I want more connection with them. They all kind of had a same feel to them. Yes, the voice actors made them sound different. Yes, the models look different. However, at some point, I just stopped listening to them, and it didn't feel good. At some point, I said, you're going to tell me about a new problem I've already heard? You're going to ask me to go find you another thing? I bet you are. 3 clicks later, new quest. Go pick up X item for me, which I was happy to do. I want to go out and explore the world and fight. That was fun. Part of me thinks maybe a smaller cast would have helped. We have kind of a lot of people at camp. But it's also kind of like the minimum number you need because they each more or less had a crafting station, which was kind of fun. But I think 1 or 2 less characters maybe would have helped. But not a lot. I think the writing was just weak. It is not on the same quality level as the rest of the game. The world building is fine, if not good, if not great. I like the idea of a society that has, through magic, been separated from the outside world, that we're trying to see if they're still alive. It's been a long time. Let's explore. This is a cool idea for a world. It genuinely is. That is a compelling narrative. Individually, inside of that larger story, these characters, for me, fell flat. I genuinely would have been happy if the game was about half as long in the main story. I think the main story could have been a full 50% shorter, and I would have had a very similar amount of playtime at the end. I was happy to just leave camp and go fight things. I was happy to explore and look for little nooks and crannies. There's a magic ability later on you'll gain that allows you to traverse the world a little differently. It was fun. But having to go back to camp and say, what do you need again, did not bring me joy. Of all of the titans you'll fight, the giants walking around, I found most of them very fun to treat like a puzzle fight. And not like a puzzle fight where you're like, I need to fit which color and which puzzle in which place. No. But a puzzle in which you're taking down a giant monster that's trying to kill you. It was the most fun kind of puzzle fight. 2 of them were not fun in comparison to the others. There were 2 fights in particular I actually struggled very much to figure out. And that's because you win those fights, one of them by not fighting. There's a monster you'll meet later on, and he has a weak point that can only be discovered once he's truly enraged and starting to calm down from this moment of rage. Because of this, your best technique to harvest the monster is to not fight, is to just wait out the rage cycle. I didn't really like that. A second monster would cover itself in ice. At first, that doesn't sound overly frustrating. However, you have to break off all the the ice and it can regrow the ice. And while you're trying to break the ice, the monster's trying to grab you. In this monster, it felt like the hitboxes were a little different from the other one. Where the other ones, you kind of climb up on them and be like, I'm going to get you. And the big hand would come and you could see, oh, it was going to get you or not. This one, the hand would be kind of close to you. And all of a sudden, you were just portaled right into the palm and it was killing you, crushing you in its fingers. And as you fell to the ground, you would look up at the sky and see the ice reform on this monster, the ice you were just trying to break. I didn't think this fight was as fun. I'm Vadd, and at the time of review, Eternal Strands is awarded a 2 out of 5. I recommend.